Northern University. And Ariana is actually going to be doing much of our presentation today. We do ask that you please feel free to communicate with us. As Eric had mentioned, you can raise your hand during the presentation and we will unmute you. Make it where you can actually ask questions because we want this to be as participatory and interactive as possible. But I'm going to turn it over to Ariana, and again, she is a resident director at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and she will actually cover some of the material that we're going to cover today, and then from there, then at any point, please feel free to ask questions because we really would like your input, thoughts, ideas, all of those things. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Before we begin, I just want to say that we as a committee are not experts on seasonal affective disorder. We were just interested in learning more about how to be more helpful to our students. And so as we go, I'm really looking forward to sharing information that we've researched, but also I'm excited to learn what you have learned as well in your work with students. So as we begin, these are our learning objectives for today's presentation. We hope that you will learn a little bit more about the causes and symptoms, that you will have gain further understanding through use of an article discussion, that you will learn a little bit about what advice to give students who may be suffering from seasonal affective disorder, and at the conclusion, we hope that we will each learn about our institution's different responses to seasonal affective disorder. So let's begin with what is it? Seasonal affective disorder, which is commonly known as SAD, is related to seasonal patterns or changes. During the fall and winter months, some people suffer from symptoms of depression that can appear gradually or come on all at once. These symptoms often dissipate as spring arrives and stays in remission through the summer months. The causes of SAD are not fully known. It is probably a combination of genetic, biologic, and environmental factors. So let's sort of begin with genetic. Studies have found that close relatives of patients with depression are 2 to 6 times more likely to develop the problem than individuals without a family history. So obviously there's a very strong correlation there. In terms of biologic factors, the most strongly linked are abnormalities in the delivery of your neurotransmitters. These are the messengers in our brain that deliver and regulate mood, and they're associated with our behavior. For example, serotonin, which is probably the most important transmitter in terms of depression. This is really important for our feelings of well-being, and it can create imbalances in our brain that can trigger depression. And it is theorized that reduced sunlight might actually drop your serotonin level. The second is melatonin. This is a sleep-related hormone, and it can actually be produced at increased levels when it's darker outside. And so this may be a common experience of why people may experience SAD. The third is really for just women, but it's reproductive hormones, such as estrogen and progesterone. And these can be influenced by the environment and may be a factor in your increased ability to have SAD. Now, in terms of environmental, this is obviously the most stronger correlated. And it showed that people that live closer to, further away from the equator are more likely to develop SAD. Shorter daylight hours and a lack of sunlight in winter may very well be the spark that really brings the other genetic and biologic factors into play. Okay. Common symptoms of SAD, there is a range of behavior, but what we'll commonly see are students with afternoon slumps, so with decreased energy and concentration. You might see students taking very long naps. You'll have carbohydrate cravings, decreased interest in work or activities that they commonly enjoyed, increased appetite with weight gain, increased sleep and daytime sleepiness, lack of energy, a sluggish movement, maybe a social withdrawal from their friends or student organizations. However, students are not going to be diagnosed with SAD unless they meet the following criteria. They must have experienced depression and other symptoms for at least 2 consecutive years during the very same season. Those periods of depression have to be followed by periods without depression, and there must be no other explanations for why their mood or behavior has changed. So when we first started looking at this, the question is, what is the difference between seasonal and non-seasonal depression? And so to kind of look deeper into this, we picked an article called Affective Disorders and Cognitive Failures, a comparison of the two by Brianna Sullivan and Tabitha Payne. And so before we begin, we put this on our website, but I just wanted to get kind of a feel for if you could just type in if you've read the article or not, and that will give me an idea of if we need to get more explanation of the article or if we can just start with the discussion.
Alternatively, we could do a quick informal poll. If you have read the article, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll just use that as a guide for how many. So if you read the article, please raise your hand now. Looks like we have about 2 responses.
Okay, well then we'll just kind of go with more of an explanation, and then we'll start our discussion. So the following are some major points that the article made. First, this was an article, just to kind of give some explanation, that was college students were used to make a comparison. And so it was several classes that were able to take a survey, and it identified if they had severe depression, general depression, or if they identified factors that would label them as seasonally affective disorder, and then they compared their responses across the two. And were able to come up with some conclusions that both that they were expecting as well as some that they were not expecting. So of the 4 main points, one is that seasonal affective disorder is a significant affective disorder. It had very significant impairment on their cognitive functions. Those were defined as things as difficulty with typical everyday situations, such as forgetting directions, forgetting names, a lack of focus or attention, memory was affected. These are obviously functions that a college student would need to be successful at their institutions. And so they found that these cognitive failures were similar in both SAD as well as non-seasonal depression. 2, women had a significantly higher rates than men did in having SAD. 3, like I said, it had a very significant impact on those cognitive functions, such as perception, motor function. And some related reported symptoms of seasonal affective disorder are less likely to be diagnosed. So when students were taking these surveys, if they were if the survey sort of listed them as having maybe some of these disorders, the students that had general depression were probably in some sort of treatment, but the students that were showing up as maybe having significant seasonal affective disorder, they were not. So this will now move us into our discussion, and the questions are: when you have heard these major points of the article, what are some of your thoughts about the information that was presented? And you can use your raise your hand function as a way for us to be able to call on you to speak.
What do you think are some of the most significant reasons why women may struggle more with seasonal affective disorder than men?
I know for me and what I've been able to research, it seems like that's mostly connected with our reproductive neurotransmitters, such as estrogen or progesterone. That's what it seems like, as if that has something to do with the effect of why women have it more than men. But that, I mean, I'm not a scientist, but that's what I would theorize.
Thank you. If there are any other questions, please feel free to ask them at this time.
Okay. Well, I'm going to keep going. In the article on page 1666, and I'm actually going to pull it up on my screen so that everyone can see it. There's this box here about a patient perspective called Miss K, who's a 19-year-old college student. So if you could take a minute to sort of read that, and then we're going to try to compare and contrast. Like, is Is this experience similar to what we see in our color students, or is it different? With some of the other questions that we were thinking about in terms of discussing, do you have any questions about the information that has been presented so far? Have you thought through some of the steps that you could do in order to help your students through some of these cognitive failures that were discussed? Please feel free to raise your hand or comment. That would be great.
Okay, we have a question from Kathy Mortensen, and it says, what is a way to help them overcome perceptual discrimination?
You know, I honestly don't know if I can answer that question, but I will definitely look that up and then email you back, Kathy.
As a response, this is Justin, as a response, I would say that one thing to definitely keep in mind whenever dealing with seasonal affective disorder or any type of cognitive issue in mental health areas in particular is to work directly with your counseling center. Something that's really important with our Campus Safety and Crisis Management Committee is that we, as often as possible, want to look at development and review of policies and protocols that we have in place. And so I would encourage any of our participants in this discussion to make sure that you work directly with your counseling center to ensure that you're not violating HIPAA or FERPA rights of students, and that you're ensuring that your protocols come across in a way that don't come to the perceived nature of discrimination. And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, well, if it's okay with everyone, it doesn't seem like we have more questions. I'm going to keep going. So what some of the researchers are saying, or what are some of the people that work directly in this field are saying in terms of what advice should we be giving to our students? Well, first, we need to find ways to get them more light. And so a couple options to do this would be to encourage our students to go outside. Yes, it's cold outside. Yes, it's snowy. But even in dim light or overcast light, you're still having exposure to light. And so encouraging students to go out for like even a 30-minute walk to class or back from class will help them. Two, they can sit near windows, which I know sounds a little bizarre, but the light coming in through the window can really actually affect their mood. They can decorate their living spaces in light colors that reflect light. If they can add more light to their room, that's always a plus. Now, I know that in residence halls we're talking about fire safety and things like that, and that's very important. But having students find ways to just make their room brighter can really make a difference. And honestly, going tanning in moderation can be an extreme benefit. Now, some people argue about this because tanning can also become kind of an addiction. But some of the scientists are saying that just the exposure to feeling warm and heat and light can really make it a large difference in these students. There's also light therapy, which I'm going to get to in a minute when I talk about sending your students to getting health care. But having just access to light seems to be a big advantage for students or for anyone. 2, encouraging your students to eat healthy and complete moderate exercise. Yes, your students are probably craving carbohydrates at this time, but keeping their diet balanced can affect their mood and their energy levels. And so that's very important if they can try to keep their energy level in terms of their nutrition. If they have exercise, that can increase your adrenaline and your serotonin levels, and that can help reduce the biologic effects of seasonal affective disorder. 3, using relaxation techniques. Some of our campuses have wellness centers, so referring your students to wellness centers can really be a huge help for them. And there's a couple of tricks I'm going to share that we could give to our students that might make them feel better. I know it seems a little wishy-washy, but it really can help with meditation. So one would be imagining a place that makes you feel good, maybe a sunny or warm beach. Keep this image in your head while concentrating on your breathing. This mediation technique has been proven to help. The second one is sort of tensing all of your muscles and imagining the heat that would cause, and then slowly untense your muscles each one by one as a way to de-stress yourself. 3 would be visualization, where you imagine yourself on a journey, maybe hiking, where you're in the sunlight, you're creating heat and sweat, and that sometimes can help students reconnect to what they're feeling. That would be 3. And then 4 would be seeking a healthcare provider. Obviously, what Justin said is really important. We are not counselors, like we are not doctors, and it's extremely important that we are referring our students to the places that have been trained to help them and who can diagnose them if this is really what is going on. And that is going to be our healthcare centers, our counseling centers, doctors, because light therapy, which is basically a large lamp, like as you see in the picture next to flowers, that creates heat and light in a room, those can be given by doctors or healthcare professionals, and it has been proven to be like 90% effective in reducing the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder. But of course, like you would have to be diagnosed in order to get that, and that means they have to go see a healthcare provider. So if it's getting to a place where your students are not able to get better on their own, this really needs to be the next step. So sort of now that we've gone through the symptoms and the causes and the effects of seasonal affective disorder, and with that article we've kind of shown that seasonal affective disorder is very real. It can have really serious effects on our college students. We'd like to turn to our institutional response to seasonal affective disorder. And these are some of the questions that we as a committee have come up with to talk about. And feel free to add questions if you would like the group to talk about it, and raise your hand to answer any of these questions, and we'll call on you. So to start off with, let's go with the first. Does your institution have a crisis response plan for seasonal affective disorder? And if so, what is your procedure? Justin, does your campus have a procedure?
Thanks for asking. We do not have a separate procedure for seasonal affective disorder. We would treat this on our campus as we would treat maybe other mental health crisis response matters. So we do have policies in place and procedures in place for how we respond to mental health dilemmas or crises, and we would pair this along with that. And seeing some of the information, though, I do think there's an opportunity for us to develop more of a procedure for our staff in terms of programming, because I do think that, like, most of our campuses have like programming models, and we have a programming model, that's kind of a wellness model. that might be really neat if we set some standardized programs that maybe address some of the needs of students that may be facing a seasonal affective disorder. For instance, the need for light, and then try to intentionally program for maybe light or something in the month of February, in the month of January, those kinds of things.
I would say UVI is the same. We also don't have a specific protocol for seasonal affective disorder, but we do use our mental health response as sort of a guide in helping our students. But let's kind of move down to, so if we do more programming, what kinds of training that we could provide our student staff or our professional staff on how to do that? What kinds of training would you provide or support?
And again, if there are any ideas that you all have about maybe, like what Ariana just asked, like if there are trainings that you could do with staff, maybe some of you have done some effective things right now. And if you'd be willing to share those, we'd really appreciate it. And we'd love to unmute all of you and make it where we can have an open discussion. Kathy has a question. Kathy Mortensen just asked, I think some good training ideas would just first of all educate on what seasonal affective disorder is, and then working on ways of helping them find more natural light. And I think that seems like a very good response. Have any of you covered this material, like let's say with your undergraduate student staff, not necessarily your professional, because I'm assuming that that is covered, but have any of you done trainings recently about seasonal affective disorder? And if you have, if anyone out there has, okay, I see that we have some response that says no from Brian Connor, but if any of you have done a training, what specifically did you train on? Any thoughts? Going once, going twice. I think I want to go back just with the slide that was presented on previously by Ariana. There are some really, I think, exciting opportunities, maybe for some, like, I mentioned about the programming model, but there may be some exciting opportunities for our student staff to actually have some really fun interactive events. And I can tell you one that we've done in the past to actually kind of address some of this is, a very popular television show is Extreme Makeover Home Edition. And thank God it's not Extreme Makeover on our campuses, because can you imagine if we were paying for rhinoplasties with today's economic situation. But anyway, with the Extreme Makeover Home Edition, we actually worked with an interior designer and worked on ways to increase lighting and stuff in student rooms. And it made it kind of a contest, and then from that we actually posted some of those pictures and actually gave like cost-saving ideas to students. These are some really inexpensive places to go to get lighting, and these are some inexpensive lighting options. And so, working with like Walmart and Kmart and things like that, and encouraging students like, this is the current layout of all of our rooms. These are the dimensions, and here are some decorating ideas to make your room brighter and lighter for this time of year. That may be something that you want to work with your student staff with, to kind of give them a training opportunity, but also an incentive or a challenge to do something really creative with their students.
Some other programming that you could do at this time, traditionally you'll see a lot of sporting events that happen in the spring, in the summer, and early fall. But there are things that you can do in the winter to get your students outside. They can play broom ball in terms of ice skating. They can go on jogs or runs together. They can go on long walks, hiking. These things can be done even in the winter. And yes, it's cold out there, but getting more light and getting more activity can really be a great help for our students. Also, programs about your dining hall and eating right, eating healthy. These are things that could really be helpful at this time of year to help students have a more nutritional, balanced diet that keeps their energy levels level. But there's also some really great ideas to really encourage our students in terms of programming.
In terms of the fifth question on there, it talked about resources that your campus may use to guide their practice in working with or dealing with students with seasonal affective disorder. I would encourage you all, if you're familiar with or if you're not, I would check CAS standards, and that's CAS standards. They have a lot of protocol information and things for departments, especially residence life, in terms of how to work appropriately. And they have them, obviously listed as best practices. In addition to that, I would also check with maybe some of your local area state representatives, or not representatives, but like organizations. For instance, in the state of Ohio for private schools, the Association of Independent Colleges and University, AICUO, actually shows some protocols that are very effective, and actually has like worksheets and actual training seminars that allow you to do hands-on practice. So, they'll have simulations or case studies for you to work from, and with those case studies, they'll give you ideas of best practices within your area. And I would encourage you all to maybe check with organizations like that as well. Back to Ariana. We do have a hand raised, actually. Kathleen Gandy. Let me see if we can unmute you and make it where you can talk. Eric, if you could help a little bit with Kathleen Gandy's volume, we're not able to hear from her.
Sure. Kathleen, you've been unmuted if you'd like to speak.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to mention that we actually do have daylight therapy appointments offered at our University Health Services here on our campus at Central Michigan University. And those are offered by, the doctors, the nurses, physicians' assistants. And I don't know exactly what happens in those appointments, but I'm a counselor, so when I meet with a student and they have symptoms of seasonal affective disorder, I can refer them over for one of those daylight therapy appointments. And they have a light box at the University Health Services Center too.
That's really wonderful. It's a great service that you can provide your students. Does any other school out there have programs like that? We have another hand raised.
Okay. Bob Byer, and Eric, if you could thank you.
Yeah, Bob, go ahead. It sounds like we may not be getting any audio from Bob. Bob, make sure your microphone's connected.
Bob just typed in that he was just indicating that they also provide those services at their health center. So, thank you, Bob. Other thoughts or suggestions with any of this, with seasonal affective disorder or other best practices that maybe you've implemented on your campuses? Because if not, we're going to then just go ahead and do some final wrap-up. Okay, Ariana, let's go ahead then and wrap up the session, please.
Okay. I just wanted to sort of show you some of the references that I used for this presentation, just so that you have an opportunity to read them on your own or to get some more thoughts. There were actually a lot of opportunities online to research. There were a lot of research articles that have been done at college campuses. And And so it was pretty easy. I just went to my University of Illinois website in terms of our library system and then researched articles. And most of our campuses have access to those kinds of things to see college student development and access to those references. So please take advantage to learn more.
And real quick, Ariana, we did have a question from Brian Connor, and he just was interested in knowing where some of the schools are at that have daylight therapy, where are they located, and I believe our earlier speaker was actually talking about that with Central Michigan University. Are there other schools that provide that service? I have not heard, I know our school, I have not heard of daylight therapy sessions before. So that is very interesting to me. And our person who actually spoke on that was Kathleen Gandy earlier. So Kathleen, do you have an email address that you could type up so that we could have people maybe be able to ask you questions about that to get more specific information? Thank you very much. Kathleen wrote back, and if you look in the questions box, I hope you all can see this, but her email is geande1kf@cmich.edu. Thank you very much, Kathleen. Ariana, please go ahead.
Okay. And I just want to thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to email me at agrivermont@illinois.edu. I would be happy to answer your questions, and if I don't know them, because once again, of course, we're not experts, I will definitely look it up and get back to you. And if you feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you so much for coming.
Great. I have one announcement before we wrap up. I'll let you finish, Justin, then I'll make a quick announcement.
Okay. Just one final thought also that I would like to just say in addition to Ariana, and thank you so much, Ariana, for doing this presentation. But just, one final thought that I would encourage you all to do is work with, your campus safety professionals or maybe your campus police, as well as maybe some of your EMT type of staff and your residence life staff, health center, counseling, those types of things. Maybe even just to use this PowerPoint as a conversation starter. And so that, because many schools don't have separate seasonal affective disorder policies or procedures in place. But this may be an opportunity for you to have that discussion and to be able to say, is this something we need to look at to ensure that we're doing best practice and best no harm types of procedures with our students. That's all I've got.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. I do have one quick announcement. This is late-breaking news. The Glacuho Professional Development Institute, we call it the PDI, due to a generous donation from one of our corporate sponsors, the costs have been completely covered. So we're still taking applications to the PDI. It's for professionals in the field of housing that have 3 to 5 years of experience. And at this session, or at this, it's an overnight, I think it's a 2-day or a 2-night event, get experience with budgeting, crisis management, decision-making, managing change, and mental health. It's in February. At this point, the cost is completely free. It used to be $140 per person, but the cost, like I said, completely free. Everything is included, including lodging, meals, and everything. So if you are eligible in that 3 to 5 year period, or if you have a colleague that you know is, we highly recommend you do this. I'm kind of biased because I did it the first year that it was offered, and I can tell you it was a very worthwhile experience and a great professional development opportunity. And Kelly is also saying she was too. I believe we were in it together. And so Kelly Thacker from Indiana University highly recommends it as well. So if you know somebody that would benefit from that, or if you would, please get your application in www.glacuho.org/PDI. Applications are due tomorrow, so you'll need to look at that sooner rather than later. Thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.